Good morning, all of you. Welcome back to today's analysis session for 26th of June 2023. So yesterday we saw about that Wagner Group. It has finally decided that it will not be marching towards Moscow. So it returns back to the base under the deal with Putin. So heavily armed Russian mercenaries, they withdrew from the southern Russian city of Rostov overnight under a deal that diffused an unprecedented challenge to the authority of the president of Vladimir Putin and halted their rapid advance on Moscow. So here, Belarus, it mediates. Now, obviously, from the perspective of map work, this region is obviously very important. And this year also in prelims, we had a question about the countries which borders Ukraine. So no doubt you need to know about exactly the location of Belarus and the countries which border Russia as well. So Modi and Sisi, they inked a deal on strategic partnership. So since we know that the Indian Prime Minister is in Egypt, so here you can see the picture. He visits the Great Pyramid of Giza with the Egyptian Prime Minister. So even from the perspective of history, what were the links between Indian civilization and the civilization in Egypt that flourished at that point of time? So even that topic, like from the history, how it has evolved, that is in itself a very important area. And right now, talking about the strategic partnership, that is one thing. Apart from that, the government of Egypt bestowed the highest honor of the land, that is the Order of the Nile, on the visiting Indian leader, and described his first state visit to Egypt as historic. So, four agreements they were signed during the visit, and the first and the most important and the landmark development in the history of bilateral relationship was the signature on the strategic partnership. So it was even discussed that the green and the renewable collaboration will be an important part of future partnership with Egypt, because of the importance that the two sides attach to clean energy. So even that is going to be one area of cooperation. So we are seeing different kinds of advertisements regarding saying no to drugs. So it can cost you your looks, your friends, your future, your health, your family, and your wealth. So different dimensions, definitely you can further elaborate. You can like collect more factual points and more analytical things on these points itself, and which will make one of more multidimensional answers. So from app to fuel, Bihar government chalks out plan to tackle both flood and drought. So in this picture, you can see major rivers like Gandak and Kosi, they originate in Nepal, and heavy rain in the neighboring country leads to floods in Bihar. So you need to have a proper plan to deal with such a situation when you know that it causes floods in the state. And two rivers, Gandak and Kosi. Kosi is also known as the sorrow of Bihar. So after a delayed start, the southwest monsoon, it has advanced over most parts of the country, including Bihar, which faces flood and drought at the same time. So obviously different plans for flooding, different plans how to control or deal with drought, and obviously the plans would be different from geography to geography also. Not specific to Bihar, but even in other states, the plans would be little different depending upon the geography, whether it's a hilly area or even plains, or obviously like an arid region. So rivers like Gandak, Bagmati, Adwara, Kamla, Kosi, and Mahananda, they originate in Nepal, and heavy rainfall causes flooding in the state of Bihar. Coming to the editorial page, so here this article is about the situation in Manipur. So there is interlink in the mutual welfare. So the priority now must be to restore normalcy, even if there are scores left to be settled, the intercommunity dueling that must stop. So obviously you need to take into account the interest of the tribals and the non-tribals, the majority and the minorities. So Kuki, it is one of the tribal community found in the state of Manipur. So outreach to diaspora and the statesmanship here in a speech while addressing the Tamil diaspora in Tokyo in Japan in the course of his overseas tour in May 2023 to Singapore and Japan to attract investments to the state. The Tamil Nadu chief minister had said that the government of Tamil Nadu would protect the Tamil diaspora that is spread far and wide in search of education, business, and employment. He added that protecting the Tamil language meant protecting the Tamil community, and he held forth the promise that the government, the ruling DMK, it would extend all support to the Tamil community. So here some facts are given about the Tamil diaspora, which is spread in different countries. So this is not so important article from the perspective of the like mains examination or even prelims, but here what we can like what it is basically pointing towards is the broader topic of like you can find out about which all states are the top four states in terms of FDI investment into India from the foreign sources, and then in which all sectors do we get the maximum amount of FDI. So here again, this article is talking about the India-US deal for these 31 MQ-9B drones, and that's how they look. So what are the capabilities of it? And then what is the process to be followed for the timely delivery? So firstly, looking at their capabilities. So here we see like they have two variants, which is one is the Sky Guardian and another is the Sea Guardian. So that is the maritime variant. It's very clear from the name itself. So MQ-9B is designed to fly over the horizon via satellite for up to 40 hours, depending on configuration in all types of weather, and safely integrate into civil airspace according to its manufacturer. And when we talk about the Sea Guardian configuration, it can include a 360-degree surface search maritime radar, automatic identification system, sonobuoy monitoring system, and sonobuoy dispensers for persistent anti-surface and anti-submarine warfare missions. So that's there. So here we are having details about what UAVs are already in service. So Indian Navy has leased two MQ-9As from the General Atomics, with the maiden flight taking place in November 2020. And in the 2 years of operation till November 2022, they had completed 10,000 flight hours. So that has helped the Indian Navy to cover over 14 million square miles of operating area. And then they are also equipped with the AGM-114 Hellfire missiles. and the Predator became a symbol of the US war on terror after the 9/11 attacks. So you can see a much more and much clearer picture of this UAV. So given its significant loiter time, wide range sensors, multi-mode communication suite, and precision weapons, it provides a unique capability to perform strike, coordination, and reconnaissance against high-value, fleeting, and time-sensitive targets. You can see one of them is flying in the airspace. Moving further, so we all know about the Titan tragedy. So how did the Titanic tourist submersible it operated? So did it follow the UNESCO guidelines for the preservation of underwater World Heritage Site or not? That is an important area. Apart from that, we have like already taken up this topic, even from the perspective of the Indian mission. So that is much more important. Do we have like India is also planning for such types of missions also or not? So we have already taken up that. So what happened to it? We know. So what is the difference between a submarine and submersible? So while two categories, they can overlap also. A submarine, it refers to an underwater vehicle that is largely independent and it has power reserves to help it depart from a port or come back to the port after an expedition. And when we talk about a submersible, it is generally smaller in size, it has less power, so it needs to work with the ship in order to be launched and recovered. So basically, it is not independent. So Titan, it was working with a vessel which was named the Polar Prince, and basically there was this accident which has recently happened. 5 people in the Titan submersible, they were traveling to see the wreckage of the Titanic at a depth of 3,800 meters. So the crew members, they had sadly been lost. And the US Coast Guard shared in a press conference that a field of debris with fragments of Titan was found, indicating that the submersible had suffered a catastrophic loss of the pressure chamber, which killed all people on the board. So what do the guidelines say when we talk about the UNESCO guidelines for the preservation of underwater World Heritage Sites? So firstly, you need to know about all of them. What are all the sites which have been like falls under this UNESCO list? So what do these guidelines say? So it's important to remember that the wreckage of the Titanic, it is a grave site where victims they experienced unimaginable horror and suffering in their final hours. So for this reason, international guidelines they are in place to protect the now rust-covered wreckage, which is scattered across the ocean bed as well as visitors who wish to see it. So UNESCO guidelines they stress on the long-term preservation of the underwater cultural heritage and the need to protect the surrounding waters by ensuring responsible, non-intrusive access. So these guidelines, they are similar and insist that a recovered material and artifacts, they must be managed as per professional standards. So in other words, taking souvenirs from the wreckage site is strongly discouraged. So the Union Finance Minister says that Obama's remarks about the minority rights in India are surprising. So she says 6 Muslim majority countries they had faced US bombing during his tenure as the US president, alleges that Congress is raising non-issues, trying to vitiate the country's atmosphere. So she said that organized campaigns They are being run at the behest of the opposition to level baseless allegations on the treatment meted out to the minorities. So Prime Minister says that emergency, a dark, unforgettable period in India's history. So even from the perspective of the history, this topic is important, and from the perspective of quality also it is important. So we need to know about all different types of emergencies which exist, their constitutional articles, how it can be imposed, how it can be revoked. All of that is important from the angle of polity. So Prime Minister paid homage to all those who resisted the emergency on 48th anniversary of its declaration. So said the dark days, they were an unforgettable period in India's history. So he pays homage to all those courageous people who resisted emergency and worked to strengthen our democratic spirit. He's talking about the national emergency, which was imposed in 1975. So as we talk about the Uniform Civil Code, so obviously it is going to be a very, very challenging task because again, if we want to make it successful and we want to ensure its effective implementation, then we need to have all the communities on the same page. So here, one of kind of opposition coming from Meghalaya's tribal council, they say that it will be affecting their traditions. So among the Khasis, the youngest daughter, it becomes the custodian of the family property. So here, basically, they follow the matrilineal society and they do not have the patrilineal as we have in North India. So basically, Uniform Civil Code, it is envisaged to be common set of personal laws on marriage, divorce, inheritance, adoption, and succession that would be applicable to all the citizens, irrespective of their religious affiliations. So that's how basically that is why they are saying that it will be affecting their traditions, because then they will have to follow that uniform civil code, which would be uniformly applicable all across India, and they will have to give up their traditional practices. So a retail giant helps link 8 lakh producers to the markets, and farm groups, they are still skeptical. So TechnoServe is a NGO that operates in 30 countries. It began its association with the coffee farmers in the Araku Valley in Andhra Pradesh about 6 years ago. So its intervention, it helped the farmers create and manage farmer producer organizations. So through 8 such units, the organization it says farmers' revenue have increased by over 500%. So this is a kind of a case study. So they have been promoting these farmers producers organizations. So they have like taken steps to connect these FPOs with the global farm produce and retail giant Walmart, which finds these projects. So the Walmart Foundation. So Vikram and Pragyan to return for another tryst with the moon. So talking about Chandrayaan the 3, which is it will be having lander rover, which is named after those in the previous mission. And this is going to be India's third moon exploration mission, which is slated for mid-July launch. So lander is named as Vikram after Vikram Sarabhai, who is the father of the Indian space program. Rover is named as Pragyan, so the names they remain the same as it was in Chandrayaan 1. Coming to Financial Express newspaper, so here ministries have been told to maximize the capital expenditure. Finance Ministry wants half of rupees 10 trillion budget spent by September end. Talking about the center's capital expenditure. So here we have the data. So for the previous financial year, the actual numbers, they stand at 7.36 trillion rupees. And it was around 65.4% of the total annual budget between April to December. And for the current financial year, the budget estimates they stand at 10 trillion rupees. So you can see that firstly, it has been increased, and target to spend this amount between April to December is 75% have to be spent. So let's see whether it could be met or not. And then the basics that needs to be clear: what is capital expenditure, the examples, revenue expenditure, and likewise the receipts as well. So steps to boost the spending: rupees 59,000 crores have been released to states as extra installment of tax devolution. So Baiju's earnings by September is facing the heat. Deloitte last week said it was severing ties with Baiju's over its long delayed financial statements. So the developments raise questions about the edtech firm's corporate governance. That is the keyword. Board members represents this initiatives have also stepped down. So education technology giant Baiju's, which lost its auditor after dealing the financial statements, had told investors that it will file 2022 audited earnings by September and 2023's results by December. So that is there. So Prime Minister, he says that he thanks Egypt for the honor. We saw that Prime Minister has been honored with the Order of the Nile, which is the great humility that I accept this, and I thank the government, the people of Egypt for this honor. It indicates the warmth and affection they have towards India and the people of our nation. So digital bill aims to balance innovation and safety. So globally, it is needed that there should be accountability of the social media platforms. In India, we will try to set the stage in a way where probably we should become the thought leader in the world. So unlike the European Union model of stressing overly on the regulations, India's upcoming Digital India Act, it will give equal weightage to innovation and social issues, communications. So this means that regulations, they will not only protect safety of users, but also give space to companies for developing new technologies without imposing rules which throttle innovation. So basically, you're balancing innovation and regulation to safety. So we are focusing upon the accountability of the social media platforms, and we'll try to emerge as a world leader in this area. Apart from that, definitely other important provisions of the bill, even they become important, so you can find out about that. So media's role is key in democracy. As we say, it is one of the part of the four pillars in democracy. So this is coming from the Chief Minister of UP. So he says emergency is a black chapter in history and media's role is key in democracy. So monsoon deficiency down to 28% from 47% in just 1 week. So that is a positive news. And widespread rainfall predicted over the next 5 days. So as we are basically having an eye on how inflation will be moving, and since we were predicting an El Nino year this year, so it is going to be El Nino year, but here what is important is the amount of rainfall deficiency. So if deficiency is less, so it would be having less impact in terms of fluctuations in inflation, or I should say increase in inflation. So that is going to be a good thing, and that would obviously give some room to the Monetary Policy Committee to even think about cutting the repo rate. So here we have another article which is talking about inflation targeting only here. So it is from the governor of RBI. So he says that we will strive to get the retail inflation down to 4%, as that is the target level. So we continue to be watchful on the inflation front, and we expect that it will be at 5.1% in the current financial year, and it will continue to strive to get it down to 4%. So although there is an expectation of normal monsoon, but there are concerns about El Nino, and we will have to see how serious it is. So that is what I just said, that what is the intensity of rainfall deficiency would now matter. So microfinance sector in India is a very important topic. So it is back to growth. With growth rates normalizing and outlook sanguine, the mutual microfinance institutions, they are on track to grow at 20 to 25%. So India's microfinance institution stocks, they have witnessed a meaningful run over the last 12 to 15 months. So despite that, we like the sector given stabilizing asset quality after the turmoil witnessed post-COVID, and return of growth and strong capital levels of the companies. So RBI does not want an inflationary growth. So it's a very important term. You need to be clear with the meaning. Inflationary growth, basically, we can record GDP growth because of two reasons. So one is which we do not want, that is inflationary growth. In terms of inflationary growth, it is basically, the meaning is very simple, that the GDP grows because of inflation. So when we record the GDP in terms of numbers, so that numbers goes up because of inflation. So that is one thing which obviously, which is not going to be a permanent thing, or which I should say is not real growth. So the growth that is desirable is when the total output increases in the economy, the manufacturing capacity increases, the output that is produced and then obviously that is demanded, that needs to go up. And that is one thing which we can say is real growth, and which is actually sustainable over a longer time period. So that is what we actually desire for. So here we have this article about that only, that she basically, this is from Ashima Goel. She's RBI's MPC external member. So she says that India's large domestic demand, continuing the global demand for outsourced services and large remittances, insulate in it somewhat from the global slowdown. So these are three important areas. We have the large domestic demand. So basically, India, as we say, is a consumption driven economy. So domestic demand is a very, very important factor. So that remains strong, and global demand in terms of services, even that is strong. So that is also somewhere helping the Indian economy, and the large remittances that we receive. Although we expect that to slow down this year, but again, India, it made a record of crossing $100 billion mark of remittances. So these are three things which insulate the Indian economy from the global slowdown. So that is there. And you can just, go through different questions that were asked to her and the answers quickly. So when we talk about the global financial architecture, so it is coming from the UN Secretary General, Anthony Guterres. So he said that the global financial architecture, it is outdated, it is dysfunctional, and it is unjust. So all are these keywords. So he says that it is no longer capable of meeting the needs of the 21st century world. So that is a multipolar world characterized by deeply integrated economies and financial markets, but it is also marked by geopolitical tensions and growing systematic or the systemic risks. So the global financial architecture needs to be shaped in that manner that it is able to successfully function given there are geopolitical tensions, basically the given challenges and the demands of the 21st century. So again, that is very, very important topic. You can find out more about this topic. So against the backdrop of climate challenges, India and the US, they must make agriculture and food a core area for collaboration. So when like we discuss about the topic that what are the more potential areas where India and US they can work. So this can be one of the suggestions from your side that we can collaborate more in agriculture and food sector. So here the US is at the forefront of technology, not just in defense, space, and chips, but also in agriculture. So in 1960s, when India was struggling with food security, several agricultural universities they were opened with support from US universities, and we know about Green Revolution. So that's there, and that is there. So here basically how can US help in agriculture sector in India is the thing that I'm looking for in this article. So here we have the data also that there is no doubt that the US it has been a superpower both in the economic terms as well as the military might for quite some time. And as per IMF also US economy in April it stood at $26 trillion. The per capita GDP was at $80,000 at the current prices, and in comparison to that, India, it is way behind. So our GDP is at almost, it is going to touch $4 trillion. Our per capita GDP is just $2,600. You can see the huge difference that exists. So India's per capita income is in fact the lowest among the G20 countries. So in terms of the purchasing power parity terms, however, we see that India's GDP it improves to $13 trillion and its per capita GDP to about $9,000. But still we are like way behind US. So that's there. And here we have the figures for China as well. So in PPP terms, China already has the largest economy at $33 trillion. And that is the largest economy in the world with a per capita GDP in PPP terms of about $23,000. So for the world peace and prosperity, it would be best if these three countries they work together. But the foundation of any friendship and working relationship is trust, which requires transparency in behavior and actions agreed upon between them. So it is here that the political system of democracy it wins over authoritarian regimes. So we are not saying that democracy is without its flaws, but be it US or India, but it is certainly better than military or authoritarian regimes is the argument. So towards self-sufficiency in edible oil, we know that India is like dependent upon the imports of the edible oil to the tune of 60%. So here, developing the domestic capacity is very important. So for 2 to 3 years, the government it needs to let the market forces rule and stop cushioning the consumer from higher edible oil prices, like as we did in 1991 structural reforms. So once the farmers they see remunerative prices, we can have Atmanirbharta on the edible oil. So in the interim, the government should not tinker with the tariffs and the quotas or resort to excess imports to cool down the domestic prices or provide import subsidies. So basically, the protection and the support that is being provided by the government should not be provided for a time being. That is what the argument is, according to the author. So, changing dietary patterns and a shift towards a more oil rich diet, it has led to increased demand for edible oil in India. So, India is the second largest consumer of the edible oil in the world. So, consumption of palm oil in particular, even that has witnessed substantial growth. So, it is widely used due to the low cost and versatility and the high yield. So, here we have other data. Apart from that, so we know that obviously the domestic production, even that is not kept pace with the consumption. So there is basically mismatch between the domestic production and the domestic demand. So that's why our reliance on the imports is very high. And talking about the India. So India is one of the major producers and consumers of vegetable oils, and it accounts for 12 to 15% of the area under oil seeds globally, and 6 to 7% of the production of vegetable oil in the world. So one reason for the shortfall is the limited arable land that exists in India, because a significant portion of the available land is dedicated to sowing paddy and wheat. So that's why we have limited arable land that can be used for the cultivation of edible oil. So added to this is the fact that some oil seed crops, they require specific agroclimatic conditions. So that may not be available in all the regions of the country. So you can find out about exactly what type of climatic conditions are suitable. And moreover, as compared to the major oil producing countries, oilseed crops yield in India is also very low. So fairly like when we talk about the comparison, so yield is low in India. And other major reason is that Indian edible oil sector, it has given primacy to the interest of consumers, overlooking the farmer's interest. So you need to balance between both. So obviously it adversely affects the market equilibrium also. Then why would the farmers would be cultivating them? So the prospect is a remunerative returns to the farmer producers of the oilseed also. So the policy flip-flops over the years with changes in regulations and tinkering of the import duties have fostered uncertainties for the market participants and the farmers alike. So in 1980s and 1990s, the government initiated research and development programs to improve the oilseed cultivation practices, develop high-yielding varieties, and enhance processing technologies in this sector. But these efforts, they were aimed at increasing domestic production and reducing the reliance on imports. But thereafter, tinkering with the policy to placate the consumer sentiment, it has been the panacea, be it reduction duties or occasional ban on times a bad ban at times. So in early 1990s, import restrictions and tariffs, they were gradually reduced to encourage competition and improve the availability. So with this, we saw increase in the imports and availability of wider variety of cheaper edible oils in the market. So that basically discouraged the domestic production of oil seeds. And apart from that, we are like majorly importing from Indonesia and Malaysia. These are the largest partners. Coming to Indian Express newspaper. So here we have We have taken up these two topics already about emergency and India-Egypt relationship. So we are trying to find a common ground. Delhi and Cairo, they have common ground in fighting religious extremism, and strategic partnership pact is expected to give boost to the ties, which trace their history to ancient civilizational links. So that is the historical link that even I was talking about. Apart from that, so here we have this article about the Tughlaq fort. So, with a history of over 700 years, the story of Tughlaqabad Fort is as fascinating as the remains that are left of the structure, which was built in 1321, 14th century by Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq, the first ruler of the Tughlaq dynasty that went on to rule for nearly a century. So this is the fort, and the story goes that Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq, whose original name was Ghazi Malik, he was a governor under the rule of Alauddin Khalji. So historians say that Mubarak Khalji succeeded his father's throne, and Malik, he suggested he build a fortified city. So Mubarak laughed off the proposition, telling Malik to do it himself if he became the king. So in 1320 AD, Malik took over the throne and became Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq, and he began work on his ambitious plan of building this Tughlaqabad fort. So roughly it is octagonal on plan, and you can see red sandstone that is being used. So, quoting the words of Albert Einstein, he says that the world will not be destroyed by those who do evil, but by those who watch them without doing anything, would be basically responsible, more responsible for the destruction. So you can obviously interpret in different forms and connect with the today's world through examples and your own explanations. So here this article is talking about Indo-US relations. This has been repeated a number of times, so I'm not taking this up again. Task in Manipur, again a repeat. So again a topic uh, of Uniform Civil Code. So a code for gender justice. So the challenges, what would be the major benefits if we are coming up and it gets implemented. So you need to know about that. The recommendations of the latest law commission, we have already taken up that. The 21st Law Commission had suggested that a nationwide UCC is neither necessary nor feasible, and its successor has sought views from the public on this issue. So it has always been a contentious idea. Article 44 of DPSP talks about the Uniform Civil Code. So the insistence on misogynistic practices, it gives credence to the political beliefs about the Muslim conservatism and the backwardness. So it provides fodder for Hindutva politics and the silence of Congress and other opposition parties during the women-led movement against instant triple talaq made the BJP walk away with the credit of abolishing this practice. So even this topic of women-led development is very, very important. And that is one of the potential topics even for essay as well. On the explained page, so why Punjab and Haryana matter in poor monsoon years? So all weather contributions of these two states, their share in the central pool in percentage forms for wheat and rice has been depicted. So talking about their all weather contributions, so they contribute around 28.8% of rice and 70% of wheat. So you can see the contribution of wheat is so high. And we can say that the contribution, it has declined for both from 2003-4. Right now, we were talking about the figures for 2022-23. So here, so diversification, the procurement, traditionally it is concentrated in Punjab and Haryana for wheat, and these two plus Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu for the rice. So it has come on the back of the Green Revolution spreading to more states and their governments establishing infrastructure for MSP. So bad year can obviously make a difference. So this has already been seen in case of wheat. The last two crops, they weren't great. And owing to the unseasonal temperature surge in March last year and heavy rains in March this year. So that is at a time of grain filling. So low production in combination with the high MSP market prices. It will lead to wheat procurement from Madhya Pradesh plunging for almost 13 million tons to 4.6 million tons, although it rose to 7 million tons in 2022-23, but MP it has dropped way behind Punjab. Then we are having concerns about the El Nino this year. So during the current southwest monsoon season, the country has so far received rainfall of 27% below the long period average. And El Nino earlier than anticipated arrival and the sudden gain in the strength between March and May has cast a shadow over the remaining part of the monsoon. So right now, the situation is more of positive in terms of the rainfall deficiency. We expected it to be around 47%, but it has sharply dropped to 27% in just a week that we saw. So Punjab and Haryana, they act as the savior states. So when farmers, they've assured access to the irrigation. So Punjab, it cultivated paddy on 31 lakh hectares of land. And we have the director of the Punjab's agriculture department sees no reduction in rice area this year. So if at all, it might increase due to diversion of some area from the cotton as well, which is vulnerable to white fly and pink bollworm pest attacks. So policymakers and economists, they have advocated weaning away Punjab and Haryana farmers from rice and cutting back the wheat acreage. But today, with precariously balanced government stocks and global rice prices soaring at their highest since November 2011, these very farmers, they may play the savior yet again. So on the one side, we've been talking about that farmers, they need to, diversify the crop cultivation. They need to move away from the water intensive crops, specifically in the states of Haryana and Punjab, because there we are seeing high reliance over the cultivation of rice, wheat, and sugarcane. So, but at the same time, we are seeing these states are the savior states right now because we are not seeing the, cultivation trend changing majorly as of now. But then at the same time, they play the role of saviors. So among the Biden's gifts to Prime Minister Modi, book of an American poet with a Nehru link forms one of them. So quite essential American poets, the only writer to have been awarded 4 Pulitzer Prizes. Robert Frost, it was one of the 20th century's most popular poets. So he's recognized as a poet whose work represented the quite essential American life. His poetry combined elements of romanticism and modernism in human style, and in a career spanning over 5 decades, Frost wrote of nature and the loneliness of the human condition. Talking about his India's connection, so The gifting the first edition collection of the first work of the Prime Minister may be emblematic of the poet's stature in the American literary life, but much before that, Frost had found an admirer in India's first Prime Minister was Jawaharlal Nehru. So anecdotes of Nehru's friends and close associates mention his particular fondness for stopping by woods on a snowing evening towards the end of his life, beset by the health issues and troubled by the reversal in 1962 China, where Nehru is said to have kept a copy of Frost's poem by his bedside with the last stanza of Stopping by Woods, which reads like, the woods, they are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. So these were heavily underlined by the Indian Prime Minister. So what is the Prigozhin's rebellion? So Putin could face questions about how Wagner Group chief was allowed to go this far. And in the war, absence of Wagner troops may not matter numerically, but Russia could miss their ferocity in fighting. So Prigozhin, who's the leader of Wagner Group, owes his success to Putin. And why has he turned against his benefactor? So let's understand that. So Wagner Group under Prigozhin has benefited Russia significantly in this war against Ukraine. So it was this mercenary group that captured the key regions of Soledar and Bamuk for Russia. And because of the Wagner troops' military contributions, Prigozhin enjoys some popularity and influence. So he was trying to resist moves by the defense ministry to bring all the private military companies under their control. So he has had a long-standing grouse with the Russia's defense minister and the armed forces. So in Ukraine, it essentially boiled down the fact that he felt they were not conducting the war correctly, and he was openly criticizing some of their tactics also. So reports suggest that when he discovered the defense ministry was moving towards trying to bring all the private military companies under its control, so that's when he decided it was time for him to do something. So then he took over the southern headquarters in Rostov on Don River. So his first demand was that Shoigu and the General Gerasimov be handed over to him. So that was the first demand by him. So that's when he basically, in a way, turned against Russia. So a deal was announced after Lukashenko stepped in. And what is this deal and what exactly happened on Saturday night? So it could have led to obviously very dangerous situation and could have caused instability in Russia. So there was this deal. So on at like 7 p.m. Moscow time, the world discovered that Wagner Group had taken control of Rostov-on-Don, or at least so the Wagner Group claimed to do so. So Prigozhin, he claimed on video that he was in control of the airport and functioning of the headquarters. And at 10 p.m., he said that there were negotiations with some Russian generals at the southern headquarters in which he made this demand of this his first demand. So subsequently, he said that if this is not happening, he will go on this march for justice to Moscow. So as he declared this march, Putin came on Russian television and accused Prigozhin of treason. So basically, he called it a stab in the back and said that decisive action would be taken, which would essentially mean military action would be taken against anybody who mutinies. So basically, avoiding this thing is very, very important right now. And Prigozhin ignored this, and Wagner troops, they started moving towards Moscow in organized columns. So on the way, they also overran the city of Voronezh, and which is one of the main highway to Moscow. So they managed to travel to within 200 kilometers of Moscow as well, at which point the negotiations with Lukashenko came in. So the reason why he reached up to that point without significant resistance seems to be that the leadership in Moscow were hoping to resolve the situation without any bloodshed. So he has been like, Prigozhin has a long-standing friendship with the Belarus president, so they have known each other for many years. Details of the deal, they're not public right now, but what has been said by Dmitry Peskov is that spokesperson of the Russian president said that by Prigozhin, that's in public domain. So one is that Prigozhin's troops, they are going back to the barracks, and Prigozhin himself would move to Belarus. So those in the Wagner group who did not participate in this mutiny, they would be offered contracts with the Russian Defense Ministry. So how did actually India see these dramatic developments? So New Delhi would have been keeping a close eye monitoring the event. So through the embassy in Moscow, it would have been receiving reports on the situation on the ground. And in Moscow, situation seems to like it have been calm with work going on as usual. So there was no reason for New Delhi to panic about anything, and it was in a wait and watch mode. So you can see charges they have been dropped, and Wegener leader to move to Belarus, and his mercenaries they leave Rostov. So you can see the picture. So North Korean minister offers support to Russia. So obviously it could have led to massive scale war in Russia also. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for joining us in today's analysis session, and also subscribe to our channel if you haven't, and also hit the like button for this video.